Hello and welcome to the Wooden Ball Show. I'm your host, Dave Ball, also known as Blinson on Reddit and at Blinson1 on Twitter. With me, as always, I am joined by my partner in crime here, Blake Wood. He's known as B-Town Bomb on Reddit and at ShatMyClerk on Twitter. And today we are also joined by our resident Devils fan, Kevin. He is known as Snooty Booch on Reddit and at Kmart890 on Twitter. How are you guys doing?
Hello, hello.
Hello, doing well.
That's good. That's good. We hopefully will be joined by our Hurricanes fan soon. He seems to be having difficulties with getting the Google Hangouts to open. But while we wait for him, I guess we'll just head right into our little quick hit section. We had a trade yesterday that happened probably around 9 o'clock with Patrick Sharp being traded to the Stars. What was the... I probably should have this open, but like, do you know what the whole trade was for that?
Let me look that up.
Oh, I got it right.
Trevor Daley and Ryan Garbett was involved. They were sent to Chicago in that trade. It was Patrick Sharp and I believe some defensive prospect.
Steven Johns, it looks like, and 50% of Garbutt's salary was retained also by the Stars. Yeah, I kind of expected more for Sharp. I know the Hawks fans were talking about maybe getting a first for him, but it seems to not really happen.
If it wasn't for the defensive prospect, I would have to say that nobody won that trade.
Yeah.
Patrick Sharp is starting to get old. He's past his prime by at least a couple seasons. Trevor Daley was starting to do good things for Dallas. Ryan Garbett, though, whatever. But giving up Trevor Daley...
Yeah, that was like, what, their second best defenseman behind Klingberg last year or something? Very surprising they gave him up. Especially with the Stars, not having a good defense. That's their biggest problem.
However, that defensive prospect, that does add to a unit that's been in need of some assistance.
I guess, yeah.
But they giveth and taketh away in this trade.
Yeah. But the big component behind this trade is the Hawks are now below the salary cap. So that's kind of the big reason behind this trade. I know they're still hoping to be able to sign Johnny Oduya, who is a UFA this year, but they only have a little less than $1 million in cap space right now.
Oduya had recently turned down an offer by Buffalo.
So they're probably going to have to trade at least one other person if they want to re-sign him. And I'm just not sure how they're going to be able to do it.
Brian Bickles was another trade bait, but at this point I'm not sure how they can pull that off. I doubt they can do a player-for-player trade with Bickle. It would have to be Bickle and something else shiny.
Yeah. But Stan Bowman is going to be able to do whatever he does. He's a very good GM. So I guess we kind of just have to wait and see if they even redo sign Oduya. They might let him go. Because he's a UFA, he can go anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
So.
In the Sharp situation there, it got interesting with Washington acquiring TJ Oshie. I personally had thought Sharp would be going to Washington.
Yeah.
That seemed like a hot commodity for him there, but they get Oshie, so they don't really need Sharp at that point.
They also have Williams there, too.
Yes.
I guess it's an even trade, definitely. So another thing that happened was Vladimir Tarasenko was re-signed. Blake, how do you feel about that?
8 years, $60 million, the largest contract in Blues history. Yes.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow. That's actually surprising. That was the most. Well, he is making 7.5, so I guess yeah, makes sense.
And money is bigger now.
Yeah, that is true with the salary cap not really going up there.
But I was thinking he'd get I wasn't thinking he'd get the max 8-year deal. I was thinking there would be some uh, wiggle room in there, just in case he all of a sudden, for some reason, would start to not get good.
Mm. I don't get why he would. He's 23 years old right now. He's not like he is on the downslope of his career.
Hmm.
When this is done, he's going to be 31, so he's still going to be towards the end of the prime of his career. So you locked him up for all of his RFA years too. So
Yes,
it's a nice deal. He's worth the money. Definitely, he is a very good player, and he's kind of who you're building your team around. It seems.
pretty much. We're uh, some hints at perhaps becoming a more finesse, a more speed team.
Mm.
But when you trade for Troy Brower, I'm not sure about that.
Or you have yeah, Troy Brower's not really that fast, definitely. But yeah, I guess it's a good deal for them. I personally am fine with it. You seem to be fine with it, so it passes your eye test, it seems.
It was
So.
the it was the I was totally expecting a large contract out of him. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not surprised or not as excited, I guess, because I was totally expecting this sort of thing to occur. If anything, this was the one thing this offseason I 100% would have guessed would happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really all your team has done this offseason, hasn't it? Besides trade Oshie. Y'all haven't really done much.
And sign like 3 seventh defensemen.
You have to have AHL depth there. So I guess with that being said, we will head into our Devils interview now. So I'll let you take over, Blake.
Let me pull up the New Jersey Devils stats so I can have something to work with here. New Jersey Devils Hockey Clubhouse. That should have some stats there. Statistics. Okay, there we go. Team statistics. Okay. All right, Kevin. The 2014-2015 New Jersey Devils season once again did not ended in the regular season. Just to give us a brief summary of how the season went to introduce us into this team preview.
Yeah, sure thing. So last year, last offseason, the Devils went out and signed a couple um, free agents to help address needs. One of them being Michael Camilleri. One of the biggest problems the Devils had the previous season was scoring. So they went out, signed Camilleri to help obviously address that. And it worked at first. Devils first few games they were scoring 4 or 5 goals, surprisingly. After that, it quickly jumped. Coaches, specifically what we expected from a 4th overall pick. But too little, too late, obviously. As the season wore on, the team just wasn't getting it done. There were hopes of moving some of our assets at the deadline to further improve the team, to improve for next year. But Lou Lamoriello, as always, waited to the last minute to admit that that the season was a loss, moving only Yager and Zidlitsky, both within the week of the deadline. And so we knew what we expected from the team, and it just became the same as the year before, another regular season finish. I think it was.
You mentioned Camilleri. He did make a impact for his new team in the season. He led the team in the season with 27 goals. However, after that, you see a fairly sharp decline in goals: 16, 16, 13, 11, 11, 10. Discuss the offense there. That drop off. It's interesting to say the least.
Yeah, like I said, scoring has always been a problem the past 3 or 4 years, ever since the departure of Parise and Kovalchuk. You just haven't had anyone able to step up and fill their shoes. Putting it all when in 2011, 2012, when we had those lines, as well as the reunited tandem of Elias and Sikora, there was 4 30-goal scorers along with David Clarkson. But Kovalchuk was injured. The following season, everyone just kind of dropped off. It hurts to see. But we just don't have secondary scoring. We have trouble rolling 4 lines. And a lot of our players just aren't. We don't have anyone that we can rely on to be a consistent goal scorer, like Camilleri is for our team.
Well, that's not to say 16 goals by Adam Henrique and Steve Bernier. It's not to say that's bad, but again, I find the 27 by Camilleri followed by that 16 to be interesting. What do you think the future is with Camilleri? Do you see him remaining a Devil there?
Well, we have him locked up for another 4 years, I believe.
Okay.
So he'll be here for a while. After that, I think it just depends on how the seasons go with him. There's always been rumors in the past that Lou Lamoriello was going after him from Calgary and Montreal. And when we did sign him, he did admit that he spoke with some ex-Devils, Brian Giunta and Scott Gomez, during his time in Montreal, and they told him about the organization, and there was a mutual interest between Camilleri and Lamoriello to sign here and play here. So it's all good. That's a good sign.
Scott Gomez is another forward I'm intrigued to hear more about. His season stats here, he only has 7 goals, however, 27 assists, so he racked up 34 points that season.
Yeah. That was a sensitive subject, signing him back. He came after, obviously not living up to his contract in Montreal, being bought out. He's had a rough career lately, and he came to the Devils during training camp, and he was very impressive during the preseason games. Unfortunately, we were just loaded at center depth, and there was no spot for him, so he sat around for 2 or 3 months, I believe. And you can tell he's only played 58 games, 20 games less than a season. But as soon as he was here, he made an impact with the team. You could see he was one of the few forwards able to carry the puck into the offensive zone, and obviously he's always been a playmaker, so I'm not surprised by the 27 assists, like you said. But it was great to see him come back and show he still does have some game in him.
Excuse me. Last forward in specific to preview here, of course, Jaromir Jagr, as it turns out, and we'll get more to this in a moment, but this would be his last season as a New Jersey Devil, 11 goals and 18 assists for New Jersey in that season.
Yeah, Yager was another great player. It's great to have a legendary player like that on your team, even if it's for one season, if it's for 10 seasons. It doesn't. It's just great to see him. But that was another player who you could see he played really well for the team. His puck possession, he battled hard for it, and there are times where you can see he's just unstoppable by the opposing team. But after I don't know what happened in the locker rooms, but there's always talks of things, and he was always very vocal in approval for our coach, Pete DeBoer. Unsure why. He knows more about the game. He knows more about the coach than I do. But after DeBoer was fired, there's some tension, and things are. Some writers put out some articles. Who knows? But eventually, as we all saw, Yager was eventually moved to Florida. A little while before the deadline. It's kind of a shock.
Now we move on to the blue line, the Devils' defense. Talk about the defensive unit there.
Yeah, the defense is one of our bright spots for the future. We have a very young core there, in hopefully be spearheaded in the future by Adam Larson, Seth Helgeson, and Steven Santini, 2012 draft pick. But our oldest defenseman now, who is currently signed, is Andy Green. I think he's in his early 30s. I'm not 100% sure. Let me see. I'll bring it up real quick. Yeah, 32. So, and then the next oldest, I think, is now 24. So, but the Devils have always been defensive minded, build from the net out. So it's good to see that we're building for the future now with such a young core to work with. It definitely gives us a bright future to look forward to.
In the Devils' goaltending, speaking of bright spots, actually, I've always said that there aren't very many goalies in the league that can match Carey Price's ability of single-handedly carrying his team to victory, except for Corey Schneider.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. There were many games this past season that the Devils were only in it because of the outstanding play of Schneider. And even the stats show, other than the wins, Corey Schneider's up there with other than wins and shutouts, he's up there in the top 5 or top 10 for goals against, save percentage, everything else. And even in the advanced stats, I believe he was still in the top 5 for goals saved.
Okay, and definitely a more intriguing unit, the final unit here, the Devils' coaching staff. You start out the season with Peter DeBoer. He is let go, and Lou Lamoriello comes in on a interim basis, I think it was. He assumes the title of general manager and head coach. He moves back full-time to general manager spot, brings in Adam Oates and Scott Stevens as sort of a co-head coach position there. Take us through this wild season behind the bench.
Yeah, wild is definitely right. Pete DeBoer, through his time here, he just wasn't. I don't want to say he wasn't successful, because he got the Devils to the Stanley Cup final in 2012. But after that, it just seemed he didn't know how to keep the team motivated or how to keep them playing consistently. So like I said earlier, the Devils fan base kind of wanted him of out. Um, so when it happened in December, it was not shocking. It was kind of a relief. Everyone was excited to hopefully that it would be just in time to turn the season around. And then Lou stepped up with Adam Oates, Scott Stevens, all names we're familiar with behind the bench. And it was wild, like you said. It's just something you don't normally see, and it really couldn't get any worse. So we were hoping it would work out for us.
Now, as we grade the units, of course, it's fairly difficult to give 3 or 4 different head coaches the same grade. So, for the coaching staff, for DeBoer and Oates and Stevens, give us your overall grade, your overall evaluation for them in the season.
Ooh. Well, I'd say DeBoer ran with what we expected, but unfortunately our expectations were very low. And so, and then he was a disappointment for what we wanted. But then with Oates and Stevens and Lou, I mean, we were hoping again to turn it around, but it obviously didn't. Personally, I was satisfied to see them getting things going. Specifically, like I said earlier, Stevens getting Larson back into the game, getting his confidence back up. For such a young guy, it's great to see him playing better. So I would say Oates and Stevens did a pretty good job with what they were left with.
Oh, and also, co-head coaches, it's something that really in any level of sport, from high school all the way up to the pros, really in any sport, it's not a very usual occurrence. Sort of take us through and explain to us how that came about.
Honestly, I'm not sure how it did. Oates was a assistant coach with us for a long time, usually running the offense and the power play. And Stevens obviously has a long history of being with the Devils. He was defensive coach last season. So, and then Lou likes to keep it all in the family. So when we needed a head coach, it's a common sense pick for him to bring back 2 names that have already worked with the team. And rumor is both of our co-head coaches were seeking their own head coaching job. So sure they were excited to come back together. Chance to prove that they have what it takes.
Mm-hmm. And for the offense, defense, and the goaltending, same thing. Just give us your overall grade and evaluation of those units.
The goaltending, top marks. The toppest marks you can give. Might be a slight bias, but I think Korsnider is the best goalie ever. Or right now, at least. Defense, definitely improving. Even with it's a young group, so obviously they're not going to be the best bunch, but definitely an improvement and great to see. And offense, they're moving in the right direction, just taking step by step. It's just going to be a very slow process, I feel.
All right, and now we head into what has occurred so far in the offseason, and more specifically, we'll include the past trade deadline in this as well,
All right.
because this is the transaction section of the review. In the past trade deadline and in the free agency so far, sort of go over the big pluses and minuses to the Devils.
All right. For the trade deadline, I believe there were minimal moves, as far as memory can serves me. Like I said earlier, the Yager was traded to Florida for 2 picks, and Marek Zidlitsky, one of our older defensemen, was traded at deadline day to Detroit for a third-round pick, I believe it was. 2 moves that we were expecting. Both players were on 1-year contracts. They were older, and we were hoping to move forward the rebuild. So moving them for assets was a good move viewed by the Devils fans. I believe that was it for the deadline day. Do you happen to know if there were more?
Didn't Gomez join the team in the trade deadline as well?
No, Gomez was signed November or December.
Oh, okay. Yes, Yager and Zidlitsky. Those were at least the big names move
Yeah.
for the Devils in the trade deadline, and now the free agency so far.
Free agency, we've made, again, very few moves. We signed defenseman John Moore, who was an unqualified RFA from Phoenix. I believe we signed him to a 3-year deal. That's another bright spot. He is now our second oldest defenseman at 24. And that's another guy that should help with the evolution of the team and moving forward, just being a good someone we can build the organization with. So hopefully that's a good start. We also signed from Europe. Oh, I cannot remember his name. Another defenseman, another young one. Watsky. God.
And now, just to kind of go off topic here a little bit, you mentioned John Moore being now your second oldest defenseman at the age of 24. So the Devils certainly have uh, a young defense, currently talented defense with a lot more ahead of them, and of course Corey Schneider at goal. As we look further ahead into this free agency, it would make sense to me that if there are any additional moves to be made, it would be for forwards.
Yeah, that's all what we're hoping for. We have a plethora of defensemen, so hopefully we can move one for another young guy. We already did a trade for Nick Palmieri from Anaheim, a New Jersey native, so that's nice. And again, he's also young, so there's a whole youth movement starting with the team, and hopefully it leads to good things for us.
All right. And the other big moment so far this offseason, the NHL draft. As you mentioned, the Devils did trade for Kyle Palmieri. As the first round was coming to a close, that's when that trade occurred. Talk about that Palmieri trade, and then go over how the Devils did in the draft.
Yeah, so the Palmieri trade was, like I said, a good to bring in a young forward. He can make an immediate impact with the team, move, and go ahead rebuilding the team. He can be an integral part, assuming he's. I'm not sure what his contract terms are up, but he'll be there to help us with in the future. And then as far as for the draft, the Devils used their 6th overall pick for Pavel Zacha, a center from the Czech Republic. We do love our Czech players, and that'll hopefully be another player we can build around him. Adam Henrique and Travis Zajac we have for another 7 years or so. He signed a big contract extension. So with those 3 in center, there can be hopefully 3 depth player or 3 leading centers to build around, as well as a few of our wingers. And some of our other draft picks, Mackenzie Blackwood, a goaltender. Can never have too many good goaltenders. I believe he was one of the top-rated goaltenders for the 2015 draft. And then Blake Spears, another center. Colton White, another defenseman. And Brett Sene, a left winger. Unfortunately, I don't know as much about them. Can't give proper insight. But it's good to move. We have some good players to work with, so hopefully.
Going into the draft, what were viewed as the needs for the Devils?
The needs were forwards, and everyone wanted. We were hoping that Marner would somehow drop to us, but obviously it did not. That was so. But yeah, like I said, we're loaded at the defense right now with our core, and then we ended up signing and 2 more. So hope was to have some good young forwards that could come in, we could use in the near future to help move the team forward. But I mean, I think we did pretty well. So.
All right. And as the off season continues, as we, I suppose you could call this the dog days of the NHL off season here. There's normally not a whole lot going on this late into the start of the free agency period. Would you expect the Devils to lay dormant, or would you expect them to at least make a couple more signings?
I would expect another move or 2. We're kind of overloaded at D, so some names getting tossed around are Eric Jelinas and John Merrill, both young defense guys. Merrill's is a pretty good defenseman all around, and Jelinas is a good power play specialist. He's got a very hard slap shot, so could help. He could help quarterback a power play. But other than that, I don't think I don't believe Shero will be doing too much more. So I think he's just going to kind of wait it out, see how we look up, see how the season goes, and move from there.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that name, too, because I was about to completely forget about that, too. So the New Jersey Devils, they joined the likes of Edmonton and Toronto in making some changes to the front office, the general manager position and the head coach position, and we'll start with the hire of former Penguins general manager, I believe, Ray Shero.
Yeah, That was a shocking move, to be honest. I remember that day I saw online that Lamorola was planning a press conference. I, honestly, I thought I went, this is odd, but okay. I went into a meeting at work. I came out to a notification saying Lou was no longer the general manager. And it took me aback. Took all Devils fans. Honestly, I think it took all hockey fans. Uh, took them by surprise. But that it's a good sign. I feel Lou, while he's done great things for this organization, I think it's just time to move forward. Obviously, not going to be here able to do this forever. So hopefully Shiro can bring in some good things. He's already started bringing in a new coach from Wilkes-Barre Scranton, who brought in his own assistant coaches. And recently they let David Conte go, our head scout. He's been our scout for 22 years, so you can see a full changing of the guard here under Shiro.
And you mentioned the new coach. He was the head coach of the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, was promoted to that position July of 2010. And then on June the 2nd of this year, he was named the new head coach of the New Jersey Devils. So the coaching carousel continued. However, John Hines, he is currently the youngest head coach in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, it's good to see the Devils' youngest for once. The running joke is always that we're an old team, and for the most part, it was pretty true with some of our players. But under Shiro, it's doing a whole youth movement, starting with the youngest coach, moving to one of the youngest D-corps, hopefully soon to have a good young group in all around our team.
All right, and now we look ahead into the next season as I pull up the standings here. Okay. You mentioned the youth movement, of course, the very young defense, the youngest head coach in the league. That could have its downside, however. There's this word that you hear thrown around a lot, and that's experience. Do you think that could play a factor into how the season plays out, or is the defense, at least, are they just too talented?
Oh, I believe that'll definitely affect our season. Growing pains, as they say. It's going to take some time for everyone to mesh in. It's going to be a whole new system, whole new team behind the bench. It's going, like I said, it's just going to take some time for the team to get it going right. As for the season, I don't see us on top anywhere. It's just we're in a rebuild, and it's just gonna have to move from there.
And as we look at the state of the Metropolitan Division, New Jersey last season finished with a 32-36-14 record, 78 points, only 7 above Carolina for 7th in the Metropolitan Division. As we see how the teams in this division have made some pretty big moves, most of these teams have. Where could you see the Devils finishing in the division?
Realistically, probably around the same as last season. Like you said, all the other teams made some very big moves to get some firepower for their team, and the Devils just aren't doing that. And it's not the time to go for any of those players. It's going to take some time for us to build up and become a serious contender again. No point in really wasting the time or the resources on it now just yet.
Alrighty. What do you think would be the playoff window for this team? When you can see this team making the postseason next?
Hopefully 3 to 4 years, maybe a little longer. I think it depends on how well the players all develop, how fast we can bring in some of our younger guys again, how well they can learn the game at the NHL level. We brought a couple up in the past for a few stints, and while they played pretty well, they're still young. Reed Boucher, Stephane Matteau, those are just some guys who've had time at the NHL level, and they just weren't. They're just not ready yet. So hopefully we can get them up and ready soon. But like I said, 3 to 4, maybe 6 if things don't go well, but I'm hoping sooner.
Oh, yes. And as we look ahead into the next trade deadline, would you see the Devils being buyers or sellers?
This upcoming season, probably sellers. We have a couple players who will be available. Steven Gianta, Tutu, they're on 1 year. They'll be on their final years this year. Dina Zubris, Tuomo Ruutu, and the one name that a lot of Devil fans are scared, Patrick Elias. His contract is up after this season. A lifelong Devil, and we all love him. Patrick Elias is one of those players that can do no wrong for this team, other than, signing with the Rangers. But at the deadline, we're not sure. We're all bracing for the worst, but we don't know yet.
Now, this intrigues me because my guess would be, my original guess would have been that because of this free agency and other than getting Palmieri not doing much at all with the offense while the defense and goaltending units continue to improve, I would think that the Devils could perhaps be in search of some more offense.
Yeah, definitely. Something we're hunting for. Some of the players I mentioned before are getting up there in years, so they're not going to be around. There's no real benefit in holding on to them. Chances of them resigning are low, but it's obviously tough to see. It's tough to predict something that far in advance. Something you got to wait and see how the season goes and evolves, and see how the league is going as well before you can make any real judgment on it.
All right, Dave, do you have any additional questions or comments regarding the Devils?
No, I do not. I just hope they do bad.
Be at the bottom with us.
We will slightly be above you, don't worry. Now I don't have any questions, though. So since I guess our Hurricanes fan wasn't able to get his hangouts working, Blake, I guess just go into our ending bit.
Yes. Okay, well,
next week we have the Flyers and Blue Jackets on schedule.
Okay.
So.
Flyers and Blue Jackets, our very own Dave will be an interviewer and interviewee next week.
Yes.
Be sure to stock up on the water. I don't want your throat. I don't want you to struggle doing all that. Okay, well, Thanks once again to Kevin for joining us this afternoon
No problem.
for the New Jersey Devils team overview. You can look Kevin up on Reddit. His username there is Snooty Booch, and you can find him on Twitter. His handle there is at Kmart890. And for the Wooden Ball Show, I am Blake. You can find me on Reddit. My username there is btownbomb. You can find me on Twitter. My handle there is at Shattenmykirk. And for Dave, you can find him on Reddit. His username there is Blinson, and you can find him on Twitter at Blinson1. For our hockey cast, be sure to tune in every Friday night for the Mighty Dave and Ari show on our hockey cast. And you can find us on Twitter. Our handle there is at Our HockeyCast. You can look up our subreddit. Our address there is Our HockeyCast. You can go to our website, ourhockeycast.com, for archives of previous episodes and shows. And you can find us on our YouTube page to do just that. Our address there is Our HockeyCast. For Dave Ball, I am Blake Wood. This is the Wooden Ball Show, and we are signing off.
Have a good night, everybody.